Nauru, officially the Republic of Nauru and formerly known as Pleasant Island, is an island country in Micronesia in the Central Pacific. Its nearest neighbor is Banaba Island in Kiribati, 300 kilometers to the east. With 9,488 residents in a 21 square kilometer area, Nauru is the smallest state in the South Pacific and third smallest state by area in the world, behind only Vatican City and Monaco. Settled by native peoples from Micronesia and Polynesia, Nauru was annexed and claimed as a colony by the German Empire in the late 19th century. After World War I, Nauru became a League of Nations mandate administered by Australia, New Zealand and the United Kingdom. During World War II, Nauru was occupied by Japanese troops, who were bypassed by the Allied advance across the Pacific. After the war ended, the country entered into UN trusteeship. Nauru gained its independence in 1968. Nauru is a phosphate rock island with rich deposits near the surface, which allowed easy strip mining operations. It has some remaining phosphate resources which, as of 2011, are not economically viable for extraction. Nauru boasted the highest per capita income enjoyed by any sovereign state in the world during the late 1960s and early 1970s. When the phosphate reserves were exhausted, and the island's environment had been seriously harmed by mining, the trust that had been established to manage the island's wealth diminished in value. To earn income, Nauru briefly became a tax haven and a legal money laundering center. From 2001 to 2008, and again from 2012, it accepted aid from the Australian government in exchange for hosting the Nauru Detention Centre. As a result of heavy dependence on Australia, many sources have identified Nauru as a client state of Australia. The president of Nauru is Baron Waqa, who heads a 19-member unicameral parliament. The country is a member of the United Nations, the Commonwealth of Nations, the Asian Development Bank and the Pacific Islands Forum. Nauru also participates in the Commonwealth and Olympic Games. Recently Nauru became a member country of the International Renewable Energy Agency. History: Nauru was first inhabited by Micronesians and Polynesians at least 3,000 years ago. There were traditionally 12 clans or tribes on Nauru, which are represented in the 12-pointed star on the country's flag. Traditionally, Nauruans trace their descent matrilineally. Inhabitants practiced aquaculture. They caught juvenile ibeo fish, acclimatized them to fresh water, and raised them in the Buada Lagoon, providing a reliable source of food. The other locally grown components of their diet included coconuts and pandanus fruit. The name Nauru may derive from the Nauruan word Anaroero, which means, I go to the beach. The British sea captain John Fern, a whale hunter, became the first Westerner to visit Nauru in 1798, calling it Pleasant Island. From around 1830, Nauruans had contact with Europeans from whaling ships and traders who replenished their supplies at Nauru. Around this time, deserters from European ships began to live on the island. The islanders traded food for alcoholic palm wine and firearms. The firearms were used during the 10-year Nauruan tribal war that began in 1878. Nauru was annexed by Germany in 1888 and incorporated into Germany's Marshall Islands Protectorate. The arrival of the Germans ended the Civil War, and kings were established as rulers of the island. The most widely known of these was King Alfred I. Christian missionaries from the Gilbert Islands arrived in 1888. The German settlers called the island Nawada or Onawiro. The Germans attached Nauru to the Marshall Islands for administrative purposes. The Germans ruled Nauru for almost 3 decades. Robert Rasch, a German trader who married a Nauruan woman, was the first administrator, appointed in 1890. Phosphate was discovered on Nauru in 1900 by the prospector Albert Fuller Ellis. The Pacific Phosphate Company began to exploit the reserves in 1906 by agreement with Germany, exporting its first shipment in 1907. In 1914, following the outbreak of World War I, Nauru was captured by Australian troops. In 1919 it was agreed by the Allied and Associated Powers that His Britannic Majesty should be the administering authority under a League of Nations mandate. The Nauru Island Agreement, made in 1919 between the governments of the United Kingdom, Australia and New Zealand, provided for the administration of the island and for working of the phosphate deposits by an intergovernmental British Phosphate Commission. The terms of the League of Nations mandate were drawn up in 1920. The island experienced an influenza epidemic in 1920, with a mortality rate of 18% among native Nauruans. In 1923, the League of Nations gave Australia a trustee mandate over Nauru, with the United Kingdom and New Zealand as co-trustees. On 6 and 7 December 1940, the German auxiliary cruisers Comet and Orion sank 5 supply ships in the vicinity of Nauru. Comet then shelled Nauru's phosphate mining areas, oil storage depots, and the ship-loading cantilever. Japanese troops occupied Nauru on 25 August 1942. The Japanese built an airfield which was bombed for the first time on 25 March 1943, preventing food supplies from being flown to Nauru. The Japanese deported 1,200 Nauruans to work as laborers in the Chuuk Islands. Nauru, which had been bypassed and left to wither on the vine by American forces, was finally liberated on 13 September 1945, when Commander Hisayuki Sawada surrendered the island to the Australian Army and the Royal Australian Navy. This surrender was accepted by Brigadier J.R. Stevenson, who represented Lieutenant General Vernon Sturdy, the commander of the 1st Australian Army, on board the warship HMAS Diamantina. Arrangements were made to repatriate from Chuuk the 737 Nauruans who survived Japanese captivity there. They were returned to Nauru by the BPC ship Trienza in January 1946. In 1947, a trusteeship was established by the United Nations, with Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom as trustees. In 1947, a United Nations trusteeship agreement between the three countries was approved by the United Nations. Under those arrangements, the UK, Australia and New Zealand were a joint administering authority. The Nauru Island Agreement provided for the first administrator to be appointed by Australia for 5 years, leaving subsequent appointments to be decided by the three governments. However, in practice, administrative power was exercised by Australia alone. Nauru became self-governing in January 1966. And following a 2-year constitutional convention it became independent in 1968 under founding President Hamid Robert. In 1967, the people of Nauru purchased the assets of the British Phosphate Commissioners, and in June 1970 control passed to the locally owned Nauru Phosphate Corporation. Income from the mines gave Nauruans one of the highest standards of living in the Pacific. In 1989, Nauru took legal action against Australia in the International Court of Justice over Australia's administration of the island. In particular, Australia's failure to remedy the environmental damage caused by phosphate mining certain phosphate lands. Nauru v. Australia led to an out-of-court settlement to rehabilitate the mined-out areas of Nauru. Geography. Nauru is a 21 square kilometers oval-shaped island in the southwestern Pacific Ocean, located 42 kilometers south of the equator. The island is surrounded by a coral reef, which is exposed at low tide and dotted with pinnacles. The presence of the reef has prevented the establishment of a seaport, although channels in the reef allow small boats access to the island. A fertile coastal strip 150 to 300 meters wide lies inland from the beach. Coral cliffs surround Nauru's central plateau. The highest point of the plateau, called the Command Ridge, is 71 meters above sea level. The only fertile areas on Nauru are on the narrow coastal belt, where coconut palms flourish. The land surrounding Wada Lagoon supports bananas, pineapples, vegetables, pandanus trees and indigenous hardwoods such as the tomano tree. Nauru was one of 3 great phosphate rock islands in the Pacific Ocean. The phosphate reserves on Nauru are now almost entirely depleted. Phosphate mining in the Central Plateau has left a barren terrain of jagged limestone pinnacles up to 15 meters high. Mining has stripped and devastated about 80% of Nauru's land area, and has also affected the surrounding exclusive economic zone. 40% of marine life is estimated to have been killed by silt and phosphate runoff. There are limited natural freshwater resources on Nauru. Rooftop storage tanks collect rainwater. The islanders are mostly dependent on 3 desalination plants housed at Nauru's utilities agency. Climate: Nauru's climate is hot and very humid year-round because of its proximity to the equator and the ocean. Nauru is hit by monsoon rains between November and February, but does not typically experience cyclones. Annual rainfall is highly variable and is influenced by the El Niño Southern Oscillation, with several significant recorded droughts. The temperature on Nauru ranges between 26 and 35 degrees Celsius during the day and between 22 and 34 degrees Celsius at night. Ecology: fauna is sparse on the island due to a combination of a lack of vegetation and the consequences of phosphates mining. Many indigenous birds have disappeared or become rare owing to destruction of their habitat. There are about 60 recorded vascular plant species native to the island, none of which are endemic. Coconut farming, mining, and introduced species have caused serious disturbance to the native vegetation. There are no native land mammals, but there are native insects, land crabs, and birds, including the endemic Nauru reed warbler. The Polynesian rat, cats, dogs, pigs, and chickens have been introduced to Nauru from ships. The diversity of the reef marine life makes fishing a popular activity for tourists on the island, as well as scuba diving and snorkeling. Politics: Nauru is a republic with a parliamentary system of government. The president is both head of state and head of government. A 19-member unicameral parliament is elected every 3 years. The parliament elects the president from its members, and the president appoints a cabinet of 5 to 6 members. Nauru does not have any formal structure for political parties, and candidates typically stand for office as independents. 15 of the 19 members of the current parliament are independents. 4 parties that have been active in Nauruan politics are the Nauru Party, the Democratic Party, Nauru First, and the Centre Party. However, alliances within the government were often formed on the basis of extended family ties rather than party affiliation. From 1992 to 1999, Nauru had a local government system known as the Nauru Island Council. This 9-member council was designed to provide municipal services. The NIC was dissolved in 1999 and all assets and liabilities became vested in the national government. Land tenure on Nauru is unusual. All Nauruans have certain rights to all land on the island, which is owned by individuals and family groups. Government and corporate entities do not own any land, and they must enter into a lease arrangement with landowners to use land. Non-Nauruans cannot own land on the island. Nauru had 17 changes of administration between 1989 and 2003. Bernardão Iogo died in office in March 2003 and Ludwig Scotti was elected as the president, later being re-elected to serve a full term in October 2004. Following a vote of no confidence on 19 December 2007, Scotti was replaced by Marcus Stephen. Stephen resigned in November 2011, and Freddie Pitcher became president. Sprent Dabwido then filed a motion of no confidence in Pitcher, resulting in him becoming president. Following parliamentary elections in 2013, Baron Waqa was elected president. Its Supreme Court, headed by the Chief Justice, is paramount on constitutional issues. Other cases can be appealed to the two-judge appellate court. Parliament cannot overturn court decisions, but appellate court rulings can be appealed to the High Court of Australia. In practice, this rarely happens. Lower courts consist of the District Court and the Family Court, both of which are headed by a resident magistrate, who also is the registrar of the Supreme Court. There are two other quasi-courts, the Public Service Appeal Board and the Police Appeal Board, both of which are presided over by the Chief Justice. Foreign relations. Following independence in 1968, Nauru joined the Commonwealth of Nations as a special member. It became a full member in 2000. The country was admitted to the Asian Development Bank in 1991 and to the United Nations in 1999. Nauru is a member of the Pacific Islands Forum, the South Pacific Regional Environment Program, the South Pacific Commission, and the South Pacific Applied Geoscience Commission. The American Atmospheric Radiation Measurement Program operates a climate monitoring facility on the island. Nauru has no armed forces, though there is a small police force under civilian control. Australia is responsible for Nauru's defence under an informal agreement between the two countries. The September 2005 Memorandum of Understanding between Australia and Nauru provides the latter with financial aid and technical assistance, including a Secretary of Finance to prepare the budget, and advises on health and education. This aid is in return for Nauru's housing of asylum seekers while their applications for re-entry into Australia are processed. Nauru uses the Australian dollar as its official currency. Nauru has used its position as a member of the United Nations to gain financial support from both Taiwan and China by changing its recognition from one to the other under the One China policy. On 21 July 2002, Nauru signed an agreement to establish diplomatic relations with the PRC, accepting $130 million from the PRC for this action. In response, the ROC severed diplomatic relations with Nauru 2 days later. Nauru later re-established links with the ROC on 14 May 2005, and diplomatic ties with the PRC were officially severed on 31 May 2005. However, the PRC continues to maintain a representative office on Nauru. In 2008, Nauru recognized Kosovo as an independent country, and in 2009 Nauru became the fourth country, after Russia, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, to recognize Abkhazia, a breakaway region of Georgia. Russia was reported to be giving Nauru $50 million in humanitarian aid as a result of this recognition. The Nauru government claims this aid is not related to its recognizing Abkhazia and South Ossetia. A significant portion of Nauru's income has been in the form of aid from Australia. In 2001, the MV Tampa, a Norwegian ship that had rescued 438 refugees from a stranded 20-meter-long boat, was seeking to dock in Australia. In what became known as the Tampa Affair, the ship was refused entry and boarded by Australian troops. The refugees were eventually loaded onto Royal Australian Navy vessel HMAS Manoa and taken to Nauru to be held in detention facilities which later became part of the Howard government's Pacific Solution. Nauru operated two detention centres known as State House and Topside for these refugees in exchange for Australian aid. By November 2005, only two refugees, Mohammed Sargar and Mohammed Faisal, remained on Nauru from those first sent there in 2001, with Sargar finally resettling in early 2007. The Australian government sent further groups of asylum seekers to Nauru in late 2006 and early 2007. The refugee centre was closed in 2008, but, following the Australian government's re-adoption of the Pacific Solution in August 2012, it has reopened it. Administrative divisions. Nauru is divided into 14 administrative districts which are grouped into 8 electoral constituencies and are further divided into various villages. The most populous district is Denegomoju with a total of 1,804 residents, out of which 1,497 reside in NPC settlement called Location. The following table shows population size by district as per 2011 census.